Are you tired of mediocre gaming? Do you want to game on a $2,000 dream PC but only have half that budget? Well, thank God $1,000 can get you that, if you shop smart. We have some of the best hardware on the market right now with an experience that will have you comfortably gaming at 1440p, high refresh, or even 4K. We're talking RTX 3080, 12 threads of pure CPU horsepower, 1TB Gen 4 NVMe drive. Even the power supply is from Seasonic, one of the most reputable brands on the market. But none of that makes sense, right? I've always lived by the rule, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Well, this PC is the exception. For $1,000, it goes toe-to-toe with my $3,000 editing PC. And funnily enough, you guys are to blame for making this possible. So high-end, affordable PC gaming? Let me explain. Thank you to Whokeys for sponsoring this video. We saved over $100 from this build by using Whokeys, and I can't wait to show you how you can too, using their website. Stick around and I'll explain more. So this video is not only going to be an epic $1,000 PC covering the components, the build and the performance, but it's also going to be a bit of a comparison between other options, as later in the video we will be battling this computer head to head against my $3,000 editing PC, and also another $1,000 PC that you could buy. And there's a single fundamental reason why we're doing that, and it's actually you guys. I did a poll recently asking what kind of build you guys would want to see. And damn was it close, until we got to the last option, which, if you think about it, actually makes a lot of sense. Yes, we're doing a used build today, but before you get scared and leave, let me explain. You see, with hundreds of thousands of graphics cards waiting to be adopted, sold with bundled hardware people really didn't need, want, or have the insurance for it to be covered in their home, the used market has seen an explosion in not only graphics cards but other high-end hardware barely used but massively discounted. And that presents an excellent opportunity if you shop smart, which is pretty easy to do, especially if you've watched these two videos. And if you haven't, you know what to do next. But the TLDR is we have at least 30 days to return everything, which is more than enough time to test it for any issues, as long as we get a move on. So before we get into the build, the performance, and comparing it to both our $1,000 new build and my $3,000 editing PC, let me show you what outrageous hardware $1,000 can get you right now. It all starts with our cheapest component, the case. I managed to pick up this NZXT S340 Elite a few months back from a guy on OfferUp. It's a few years old, doesn't have the best airflow, and comes with a couple minor marks, but at $30, it's a fantastic option that will allow us to allocate more budget where it matters, and I'm excited to show you what we got. But another great option near me would have been this Corsair 4000D for only $20. I did try to get this, but the seller and I never managed to figure out a time that worked for the both of us, but cases are a great option for meeting in person, as there's typically very little to test and shipping can easily cost more than the case itself. We need that money. We need it for this. This is the MSI RTX 3080 Gaming Z Trio, which can be had for just over $500 if you're lucky, but prices are continuing to come down for these, so check out up-to-date prices for everything we're using today in the video description. But I chose the RTX 3080 Gaming Z Trio specifically as it was my recommendation for best used graphics card to buy in this video, where we cover how not to get scammed when buying a used graphics card. It's going to be the biggest factor for our excellent gaming performance, and I'm excited to see how it does. The second most important thing for gaming is the CPU, and we went with the Ryzen 5 5600X, which can be had for about $120 used. 6 cores, 12 threads, while boosting up to 4.6 GHz, making it perfect for gamers looking to get the most performance at a reasonable price. You could also look into the Intel 12400, but that seemed to be a bit more expensive for both the CPU and a compatible motherboard. Speaking of, we went with the MSI B550 Gaming Plus, but that isn't going to be my suggestion. My suggestion would be the MSI B550 Gaming Edge Wi-Fi. I like both of these boards as they have a decent VRM, multiple addressable RGB headers, and BIOS flashback, which is the most important feature for us. B550 motherboards came out before Ryzen 5000, and if the previous owner didn't update the BIOS, this feature will honestly save the day. Both the Gaming Plus that I have here and the Edge that I recommend have BIOS flashback, but the Edge also has 2.5 gigabit Ethernet and Wi-Fi built in. At roughly the same price as one another, about $110, the Edge won't necessarily perform better, but it does have better features and is set up for future-proofing. Though I have the Gaming Plus on hand, so we're installing everything into that, including the Arctic Freezer 50 cooler. The CPU that we're installing it onto should come with a basic cooler included, and if it does, you can absolutely use that. In fact, I would recommend it to save some money. But there's 3 reasons why I went for this. My CPU didn't come with a cooler, the Freezer 50 is cheap on eBay at only $30, and this dual tower, dual fan cooler with 6 heat pipes will give us lower CPU temps and allow the processor to boost even higher, giving us more performance. Plus, I've been wanting to try it out. It looks pretty awesome. Pretty awesome like storage and memory prices nowadays, but I have to be straight with you guys right now. Neither of these should be bought used, but for different reasons. Memory is normally a good option, but prices are basically the same as new right now for DDR4. So if you're not saving a worthwhile amount of money by buying used, you might as well go new. And we went with the G.Skill Trident Z Neos at 3600 CL18, as this is what I had on hand. Storage, on the other hand, is something I do not recommend buying used, unless you absolutely know what you're doing. Your files and your data are far too important to roll the dice with a dodgy drive. But luckily for us, this 1TB Gen 4 M.2 drive from Kingston is only $58 and has loads of 5-star reviews. So that's what I would recommend. But as it doesn't make a difference to FPS, I'm going to use a drive I already have, as well as this power supply. This is a Seasonic Focus Plus 1000 watt, though the 850 watt models can be found on eBay for around $60. Seasonic have a great reputation, and this power supply comes with a 10-year transferable warranty that you will have the right to use even if you buy secondhand, which is exactly why it's the one that I recommend. So now that we have all the parts in front of us, apart from one more thing which we'll get together in a bit, it's kind of crazy what $1,000 can get you on the used market. Especially with this graphics card, I honestly didn't think that we'd be able to get it into the budget, but we did. And I'm really excited to see what the benchmarks show us. It really should be quite a powerful machine. But before we run them, we obviously have to build this computer together. The one thing that I'm really hoping is after we get this all built is that there's not going to be too much issues from used components. And we do also need to get one more vital thing, which we will do in a bit. But right now, let's get this thing built together. So my cooler of course didn't come with any thermal paste, but luckily enough I have some MX4 that Arctic would have supplied with this cooler if it were new. So let's get this cooler installed. Now, I've just realized that these Trident Z Neos are a bit too tall for the Arctic Freezer 50 cooler right here. When I tried putting it on, it was definitely conflicting with the first memory module in slot number 2. So what we're going to do is trade them out for some Vengeance from Corsair. Almost dropped these. And that should fix the problem. The heat sinks on these are a lot more low profile compared to the Trident Zs. We will lose the RGB, but realistically, we'll probably be covering it with the Freezer 50 anyway. Nearly all builds have complications, but this is the one that we ran into. It's a pretty common one. So time to install some new memory. No! Definitely should have checked the cooler height. That is like bang on. Side panel test. Okay. Wow, that is tight. I guess that technically fits, which is the best kind of fits. So we ran into another problem, and this one actually wasn't my fault. Well, kind of is, depending on how you look at it. But we were missing the screws for the power supply. Luckily, I have spares, but this is another thing that we were missing. The motherboard was also missing standoff screws, and the ones that were included weren't really catching very well. I assume that they were probably taken from a different build and tried to be put into this one before the guy sold the case, but they didn't quite fit. Luckily enough, I have spares for everything, but you may not when it comes to used builds, so bear that in mind, make sure that you've got everything. I didn't. Now the last thing left to do is install some fans. Now these were the ones that the seller gave me when they sold me the case, but if your case doesn't come with fans, you will need to budget for that in the total. So let's put them in and see how it performs. Okay, so now it's time to see, number one, if the side panel closes, because that's a big one. How does this go in? You're a handle, you're a lip. Idiot. So it does fit. I think I had an RGB cable over the top of it before, but oh my God, is that a tight fit. So now that it's built, I think it's time to turn it on and test it and make sure that all of our used components are working the way that they should, because that is the top concern for buying used. So why don't we turn it on and see what we're working with. Might need a power kick. So things are looking good. We are in the BIOS and this is normal, as we don't have an operating system on the machine. So we need to get Windows on this computer to run some of the games and show you the performance. I'm going to install Windows 10, which is going to be my suggestion, but we can upgrade to Windows 11 in the future if we want to. It's quite an easy upgrade path. So find a USB drive and let's get that plugged into another PC. What we're going to want to do is download the media creation tool right here. Once you run it and create your bootable drive, we then need to stick it into one of the rear USB ports on this PC, the one that we want to install Windows on. Let us reboot, and what we're going to want to do is spam F11 as it's rebooting. This will allow us to get into the boot menu of the BIOS. Then what we're going to want to do is select our USB drive in UEFI mode, right here. Follow the prompts and you will find yourself here. What we want to do is select I don't have a product key right there. We will get that together in a bit. And that will take you through to the Windows choices. What I'm going to do is select Windows 10 Pro right here. That's the one that I want to install. And then we're going to hit next. So once we're done with the install, we do need to do one more thing. Because we currently don't have Windows activated, as you can see right here, the operating system is going to restrict us from doing a few things. If you don't activate Windows, you won't be able to change things like the name of your PC, which is useful for network shares. You also can't change the theme of your PC, even simple stuff like enabling dark mode. And the most annoying is, of course, the Windows activation watermark, which can take a little bit of time to pop up after installing Windows, but if you plan to stream or record your gameplay to show friends, you're going to want to get that sorted. So let's head over to today's video sponsor, Whokeys. Even though they have sponsored this video, I've personally been using them for well over 1.5 years now and have loads of cheap activated keys. So let's add it to cart and enter TL20 right here for an additional 25% off. PayPal will have you through the checkout fastest, but you can also use another payment method if preferred. And the reason why I like Whokeys so much is that the key is typically delivered within minutes, and I've never had an activation issue. So even if you find a key $1 cheaper, I can personally vouch for these guys. They're fast, they're cheap, they work, and you can activate your Windows license by hitting the Windows key and typing activate. Then paste your key right here to fully unlock your computer and start enjoying your machine. And speaking of, I think it's time to play some games and see how this beast performs. Let's do that now. So the first place that I want to start with the performance testing is to figure out what the temperatures are like for the S340 Elite case. That front side panel being blocked off is a bit of a concern. So what I measured the room temperature to be is 20 degrees centigrade, and we kept that locked throughout our testing, but the idle CPU temperature was only 33.9 degrees, which is actually very good, even though all of our tests were run with 75% fan speed. And for the GPU, it idled at 40.7 degrees Celsius. Then we move into our CPU stress test, for which we use OCCT. Within half an hour, our temperatures stabilized and gave us 48.5 degrees for the average CPU core and 57.9 for the hottest the CPU got. That is a great result. That Freezer 50 is doing an excellent job. But I wanted to mix things up a little bit when it comes to the GPU stress test, for which we used Thermark. We have the average core temperature, the maximum core temperature, average hotspot, maximum hotspot, and the same again for the memory temperatures. And as you can see, everything is within their thermal limit, but probably running a little bit hot. So what I wanted to see is how this case performed with both the side panel on and the side panel off, and that is these results. With the side panel off, we dropped about 4.5 degrees on the core, 4 degrees on the hotspot, and about 5 degrees for the memory junction temperature. So if you were to upgrade this case, you would likely get even better thermals, which also leads to an increase in performance. Speaking of, we have the performance data for this $1,000 PC against my $3,000 editing PC. And let me just tell you this, it is not 3 times more powerful. Because I'm benchmarking multiple computers, I decided to test 3 games to give us a good understanding of performance between the systems. We have CSGO representing our esports and lighter titles, Shadow of the Tomb Raider being a mid-level demanding game, and Cyberpunk on Ray Tracing Ultra for some real punishment and to see if it's even possible for our U system to go below 60 frames per second at 1440p? And the answer is no. At 1440p, it can handle anything, no matter the game that you want to play or the settings that you want to use. This computer is going to give you an incredible experience. CSGO, 500 frames per second, which, okay, it's CSGO. That's not particularly hard, even on high graphics settings, but 165 frames per second for Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1440p high is well into the mid to high refresh level, an excellent result. But the thing that I was quite surprised by is maxing out Cyberpunk at 1440p with ultra ray tracing, still above 60 frames per second. That is unheard of for $1,000 new, and the reason why I know this is because this PC, as configured right now, without the graphics card that we were using before, is currently $1,000 new. Let me show you. Making a quick PC part picker list with all of our components but new leaves us with about $200 to $250 for the GPU. It's kind of a bit quick and dirty, but should help us understand the difference between new and used performance. And my new GPU recommendation at this price point is currently the Radeon 6600 to 6650 XT range. So let's take this 6600 XT from ASRock, drop it in, and let's see how the performance compares. And going with all new components means the GPU that we're using is of a completely different performance tier. And it shows. The $1,000 new system underperforms in CSGO by over 100 frames, which, given that it's still about 400 frames per second, doesn't mean a whole lot. But where you are going to suffer is more demanding games. Shadow of the Tomb Raider takes our FPS down from about 160s into the high 90s, meaning that this is still a great 1440p gaming experience, but it's not high refresh for most modern games, especially Cyberpunk 2077. We are down from an enjoyable gaming experience to an absolute stuttery slideshow mess. So we're obviously beating a new build of the same price in performance. That's why you turn to the used market. But I was also wondering how our computer compares if we stick our GPU back in to our $3,000 PC. The main difference between the two is that this machine uses a newer platform with Intel's 13900K processor, the best gaming CPU right now, which will also help us understand what performance uplift you would expect to gain by upgrading the CPU down the line. We also have 64GB of 5600 DDR5 memory on the ASRock Z790 Taichi motherboard, which I highly suggest you check out for high-end builds. It's also worth mentioning that the airflow is significantly better on this case, but upgrading to Intel's latest flagship and DDR5 gets you about 16% more performance, which is a pretty rough deal. So thank you Whokeys for allowing me to show you this fantastic used build. Please browse their cheap Windows and game keys below, and if you're still worried about buying used, check out how to buy a used GPU without being scammed. And if you do, you're going to need to test it thoroughly, and you can learn how to do that in this video down here. Otherwise guys, share, like, subscribe, they are always appreciated, and I hope you have an amazing day.